Champagne tasted like poison. Lindsay Lamb stood in the corner of the ballroom, watching her husband accept another award for visionary leadership in fashion. His third this year. The crystal trophy caught the light as he raised it above his head, and the crowd erupted in applause that made her stomach turn. She knew every stitch of the collection that won him this recognition. She had sketched the silhouettes at 3 a.m. when inspiration struck. She had sourced the fabric from that tiny mill in Lyon. She had convinced the buyers at Bergdorf to take a chance on the avant-garde cuts. But according to the gold-embossed program in her hand, the designer was him. Only him. Another triumph for my brilliant husband, the woman beside her cooed. Victoria, wife of one of the board members, you must be so proud. Lindsay smiled the smile she had perfected over 10 years of marriage, the one that hid everything. Of course. Across the room, her husband descended from the stage, and immediately a young woman in a dress that cost more than most people's cars attached herself to his arm. Isabella Rodriguez, the influencer model who had been his muse for the past 6 months. 23 years old, with legs that went on forever, and a laugh that carried across crowded rooms like wind chimes. Lindsay had designed the dress Isabella wore, midnight blue silk with crystal beading that cascaded down one shoulder. It looked better than she had imagined it would. Everything always did. Lindsay. Her husband's voice made her turn. He stood before her now, Isabella still clinging to his arm like ivy on a wall. His name was Richard Pemberton, though he had started life as Ricky Pembroke in a Baltimore row house. She had loved him when he was Ricky, when his clothing company was operating out of a warehouse with a leaking roof and dreams bigger than his bank account. "Congratulations," she said softly. "The collection is beautiful." "Yes, it is." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It never did anymore. "We need to talk. Tomorrow morning, 9 sharp. My lawyer will be there." Something cold slithered down her spine. "Your lawyer?" "Our lawyer," he corrected, though they both knew what he meant. "There are papers to sign." Isabella giggled, a sound like shattering glass. "Richie, you promised we could dance." He let her pull him away without another word. Lindsay stood frozen, watching them glide across the marble floor. Other guests moved past her like water around a stone. She was invisible. She had always been invisible. That night she didn't sleep. She sat in the bedroom they no longer shared, looking through old photographs on her phone. There she was at 25, holding his hand outside that warehouse, both of them laughing at some joke she could no longer remember. There they were at their wedding, his eyes full of something that might have been love. And there, years later, at the first major fashion show, his arm around her waist, whispering, "We did it, baby. We actually did it." Except somewhere along the way, we became I. The morning came too soon and too slow. Lindsay dressed carefully in a cream suit she had designed but never worn. Simple, elegant, armor. Richard's office overlooked the city, floor-to-ceiling windows that made everyone who entered feel small. His lawyer sat at the conference table, a man named Bernard, with silver hair and a smile that could cut diamonds. And beside Richard, because apparently even this moment needed an audience, sat Isabella. She was scrolling through her phone, bored already. "Lindsay, please sit." Richard gestured to the chair across from him, as if she were a job applicant. She sat. Bernard slid a stack of papers across the glossy table. "The prenuptial agreement you signed is quite clear. In the event of dissolution of marriage, you receive no stake in the company, no claim to intellectual property created during the marriage, and a one-time settlement of $50,000. $50,000 for 10 years. For saving his business, for every design, every late night, every connection she had made, every trend she had predicted, every disaster she had fixed. That's less than 1 dress costs in your current collection," Lindsay said quietly. "The prenup is legally binding." Bernard's voice was smooth as silk and just as cold. "I'm not fighting it," she said. "I'll sign." Richard leaned back in his chair, surprise flickering across his face. Just like that. Just like that. She should have screamed. She should have thrown the papers in his face. She should have demanded what she was owed. But something deeper and darker was taking root in her chest, something that knew screaming would give him satisfaction. Silence was sharper than any knife. Lindsay signed every page without reading them. Her hand didn't shake. When she finished, she set the pen down gently. "That's it then," Richard said. He opened his wallet, and Lindsay watched him pull out a $5 bill. He placed it on top of the contracts, the old paper crisp against the fresh ink of her signature. "This is all you're worth, Lindsay. You were just a supportive wife. I built this empire. These designs, this vision, this brand, it was all me. You were just there, standing behind me, looking pretty at parties." Isabella laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh my God, Richie, you're savage." Something inside Lindsay shattered, but her face remained perfectly still. She reached across the table and picked up the $5 bill. She held it up to the light, examining it as if it were a rare diamond. "All I'm worth," she repeated softly. "All you're worth," he confirmed. Then he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper meant only for her. "You think I didn't notice? The way the manufacturers always asked for you, the way the buyers wanted your opinion, the way my own partners looked at you like you had all the answers. But you were too weak to take credit, too mousy to demand recognition. You let me be the face because you were afraid of the spotlight. That's why you'll never be anything more than what you are right now." "Nothing!" The words landed like blows, each one designed to break her, and maybe once they would have. But as she folded that $5 bill and slipped it into her purse, Lindsay felt something shift inside her. It wasn't hope. It was something darker and infinitely more dangerous. Rage. Pure, crystalline, focused rage. She stood slowly, gathering her purse. "You're right, Richard. I was afraid. I let you take credit because I loved you, because I thought we were building something together, because I was a fool." She walked toward the door, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Her hand touched the handle and she paused. Without turning around, she spoke one last time. "But fools can learn, and queens who've been sleeping can wake up." She pulled open the door and walked out, leaving Richard staring after her, confusion creasing his forehead. Isabella was already back on her phone, the moment forgotten, but Lindsay would never forget. As the elevator descended, taking her away from the office that should have been partly hers, away from the life she had built and watched him claim, Lindsay pulled out her phone. Her best friend Zara answered on the first ring. "How bad is it?" "Worse than we thought," Lindsay said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "I need a place to stay. And Zara, I need you to teach me everything you know about flipping vintage fashion." "Vintage fashion? Lynn, what are you—" "He gave me $5, Lindsay interrupted. "Said that's all I'm worth, so I'm going to prove him wrong. I'm going to take his $5 and turn it into his worst nightmare." The elevator doors opened, spilling her into the lobby. Outside, the city glittered with possibility and promise. Somewhere out there was her future. Somewhere out there was her revenge. She stepped into the sunlight, that $5 bill burning a hole in her purse, and smiled for the first time in months. Let the games begin. Chapter 2. The Hustle. Zara's apartment smelled like lavender and ambition. It was smaller than the master bathroom in the penthouse Lindsay had just left, but it felt more like home than anywhere she had lived in years. Fashion. Magazines were scattered across every surface, tear sheets pinned to the walls alongside Polaroids from shoots. Zara herself was sprawled on the couch in an oversized sweater, her dark hair piled on top of her head, scrolling through vintage fashion listings on her phone. "You're serious about this?" Zara said, looking up as Lindsay dropped her suitcases by the door. "It wasn't a question. Deadly serious." Lindsay sat down beside her, pulling out the $5 bill and smoothing it on the coffee table between them. "He thinks this is nothing. I'm going to make it everything." Zara studied her best friend's face. They had met 7 years ago at a Fashion Week after-party, two black women in an industry that didn't always make space for them. Zara had been trying to break into modeling, and Lindsay had been the invisible wife standing in corners. They had recognized something in each other, some shared hunger for more. "All right," Zara said slowly. "So what's the plan? $5 doesn't go far." "It goes far enough," Lindsay said. "I'm going to do what I do best. Find undervalued fashion, transform it, and sell it for what it's actually worth. I've been doing it in my head for 10 years, fixing Richard's disasters, seeing potential where no one else could. Now I'm doing it for myself." "You want to flip vintage clothes?" Zara asked, intrigued. "Not just flip them. Redesign them. There are thrift stores all over this city selling incredible pieces for nothing because people don't know how to see them. I take $5, buy something with good bones, use scraps and my skills to transform it, then sell it online. One piece becomes 2 pieces, becomes 4. I build capital one garment at a time." Zara's eyes lit up. "That's actually brilliant. And I can model the pieces for the listings, make them look high-end." "Exactly. We make this look professional, exclusive, like people are getting access to something special." "Because they are. They're getting my vision, my skill, my 10 years of expertise. They just don't know it yet." The next morning, Lindsay walked into a thrift store in Brooklyn with her $5 bill clutched in her hand. The place smelled like mothballs and forgotten dreams. Racks overflowed with discarded clothing, most of it worthless. But Lindsay had an eye that had been trained by a decade of sourcing for a luxury brand. She found it in the back corner, a vintage blazer, probably from the 80s, with incredible structure and beautiful fabric. It was 2 sizes too big and had shoulder pads that belonged in a different era, but the bones were perfect. The price tag said $4. Lindsay bought it, spent her last dollar on thread from a discount bin, and took her prize back to Zara's apartment like a hunter returning with a kill. "You spent your entire $5 on that?" Zara asked dubiously, looking at the oversized blazer. "Trust me," Lindsay said, and set to work. For 2 days, Lindsay deconstructed and reconstructed. She removed the shoulder pads, took in the sides, shortened the length, added strategic cuts and details using scraps of fabric Zara had from old modeling shoots. When she finished, the blazer was transformed. Sleek, modern, editorial. Something that could walk down a runway. Zara modeled it against a white wall in perfect natural light. Lindsay shot the photos on her phone, edited them to look professional. She wrote copy that told a story. Upcycled vintage blazer, one of a kind, sustainable luxury. For the woman who refuses to wear what everyone else is wearing. She listed it for $200. "No one's going to pay that," Zara said. "Someone will," Lindsay replied with certainty. "It sold in 6 hours. "Oh my God," Zara breathed, staring at the notification. "Lynn, you did it." But Lindsay was already planning the next move. She took that $200 and split it. Half went into savings, untouchable, the foundation of her future. The other half went back into inventory. This time, she could buy better pieces, more materials, build faster. Over the next 3 weeks, Lindsay became a machine. She haunted thrift stores and estate sales, seeing potential in forgotten garments. A vintage dress became a modern 2-piece set. An old coat became a cropped jacket and matching skirt. She worked 20-hour days, her fingers raw from sewing, her eyes burning from focus. But not everything succeeded. 2 weeks in, disaster struck. She had invested $300 in a vintage Chanel jacket from an estate sale, planning to transform it into the centerpiece of her collection. While steaming it, she left it unattended for 30 seconds. The fabric scorched. The piece was ruined. $300 gone. Lindsay sat on the floor of Zara's apartment, holding the burned jacket, and cried. Not delicate tears, but ugly, desperate sobs. What if she was fooling herself? What if Richard was right and she really was nothing? "Now get up," Zara said, not gently. "You made a mistake. You're not a mistake. There's a difference. Now get up and make the next piece better." Lindsay got up. She learned to be more careful, more focused. The failure became fuel. Zara modeled everything, and her social media following gave them credibility. People started requesting custom pieces. Word spread through fashion circles. Each sale built on the last. The woman who had apologized for existing was gone, replaced by someone who moved through the world with purpose and precision. "Where are you going?" Zara asked one evening as Lindsay gathered her notebook and fabric swatches. "Estate sale in Manhattan. The listing shows vintage designer pieces. If I can get there early before the resellers, I can find something extraordinary." "Lynn, you haven't slept in 2 days. Maybe you should slow down." Lindsay paused at the door, her hand on the knob. When she turned back, her smile was sharp as broken glass. "Richard is out there right now, celebrating his divorce. Probably planning his wedding to Isabella, living in the penthouse I decorated, running the company I built. He thinks I'm crawling into a hole somewhere, broken and forgotten. Every second I slow down is a second he wins. So no, I'm not slowing down. Not until I've taken everything he thinks he has and made it mine." She left, and Zara sat alone in the apartment, wondering if she should be worried. But then she thought about the way Richard had treated Lindsay, the way he had erased her from every success, and she decided that maybe the world needed to see what happened when you pushed a queen too far. The breakthrough came at an estate sale in the Upper East Side. Lindsay arrived at dawn, first in line, and when the doors opened, she moved with purpose through rooms filled with the wardrobe of a woman who had clearly been wealthy and stylish in the 70s and 80s. Designer pieces that would cost thousands new were priced at $20, $30, $50 because the family didn't know their value. Lindsay spent $300 and walked out with a treasure trove. Vintage Halston, early Armani, a Givenchy coat that made her heart race. She took them home and began the careful work of transformation, not destroying their essence but updating them, making them relevant for modern bodies and modern lives. She documented everything, before and after photos, videos of her process, the story of sustainable fashion, of giving new life to forgotten beauty. Zara posted it all on social media and something magical happened. It went viral. Fashion bloggers shared it. Sustainability advocates championed it. Young designers reached out asking to learn her techniques. And most importantly, clients started flooding in. People who wanted unique pieces, people who cared about the environment, people who were tired of fast fashion and wanted something with soul. 3 weeks after Richard had thrown that $5 bill at her, a celebrity stylist contacted Lindsay. She was dressing a major actress for a premiere and had seen Lindsay's work online. Could Lindsay create something custom? Budget was no issue. Lindsay created a gown from vintage silk she'd found, transformed with her vision into something that looked like it belonged on a red carpet, but carried a story of sustainability and renewal. The actress wore it. The photos went viral. Entertainment magazines called it the dress of the season, and everyone wanted to know who had created it. When Lindsay revealed it was upcycled vintage, transformed by her hands from a $5 beginning, the fashion world lost its mind. This wasn't just design. This was revolution. This was proof that you didn't need massive resources to create beauty, just vision and skill and refusal to accept limitations. Orders poured in faster than Lindsay could fulfill them. She hired 2 seamstresses, women she knew from Richard's company who had been treated poorly and were hungry for something better. She rented a small studio space. She started sourcing larger collections of vintage pieces and creating cohesive, limited edition lines. 4 months after that $5 bill, Lindsay sat in her studio looking at an offer that seemed impossible. A prestigious, sustainable fashion boutique wanted to carry her collection exclusively. They were offering $750,000 for the rights to her next line and a partnership moving forward. Zara found her sitting there, staring at the contract, tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong?" Zara asked, panicked. Lindsay looked up and her tears turned to laughter. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. Zara, we did it. I turned $5 into $750,000. She pulled out that original $5 bill, now worn from being carried everywhere, and held it up to the light. "Phase 1, complete," she said softly. "Now comes the fun part. What's phase 2? Zara asked, though she already knew. Lindsay's smile could have cut steel. "Revenge. Real, devastating, complete revenge. I'm going to destroy his company, his reputation, his world. And I'm going to make sure he knows exactly who's doing it." That night, they made lists and plans and strategies. The apartment filled with energy, with possibility, with the promise of battles to come. And when Lindsay finally fell asleep just before dawn, she dreamed of runways and revenge, of designs that would shake the industry, of the look on Richard's face when he realized what he had lost. The Queen was rising, and she was going to make damn sure everyone watched her coronation. Chapter 3. The announcement that shook the industry. The television studio was colder than Lindsay expected. She sat in the green room, watching herself in the mirror as a makeup artist worked on her face. The woman kept chattering about the weather, about traffic, about nothing that mattered. Lindsay nodded at appropriate intervals, but her mind was elsewhere, running through what she was about to do. "You're going to be amazing," Zara said from the couch, scrolling through her phone. She had pulled strings to get Lindsay this interview, calling in every favor she had accumulated in the modeling world. The show was prime time, focused on fashion and culture, watched by everyone who mattered in the industry. "Just remember to breathe." "I'm not nervous," Lindsay said, and realized it was true. A month ago, the thought of being on camera would have terrified her. But the woman who had been afraid of attention was dead. She had died in Richard's office, buried under a $5 bill. The producer stuck her head in. "5 minutes, Miss Lamb." Miss Lamb, not Mrs. Pemberton. Lindsay had reclaimed her maiden name the day the divorce was finalized. It felt like taking off shackles. She stood, smoothing down the dress she wore. She had designed it herself, the first piece she had created since leaving Richard. Emerald silk that hugged her body like water, cut to perfection. No logo, no label, just pure artistry. In her clutch was that $5 bill, carefully preserved in a clear sleeve. "Knock them dead," Zara whispered. The studio lights were blinding. Lindsay walked onto the set, her heels clicking against the polished floor, and took her seat across from the host. Simone Baptiste was a legend in fashion journalism, known for asking questions that made guests squirm. She looked at Lindsay with undisguised curiosity. "Welcome to the Fashion Hour," Simone said, as the cameras went live. "Tonight we have a very special guest. Lindsay Lamb, formerly Lindsay Pemberton, has been a mystery in our industry for years. The woman behind one of the most successful luxury brands, yet never in the spotlight. Until now. Lindsay, thank you for being here." "Thank you for having me," Lindsay said, her voice steady and strong. "Let's address what everyone's wondering. You were married to Richard Pemberton for 10 years. His company went from near bankruptcy to a luxury empire. Then suddenly you're divorced. What happened?" Lindsay had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in her head. But now that it was here, she found she didn't need a script. The truth was sharp enough. "What happened is I woke up," she said simply. "I spent a decade building something beautiful, pouring everything I had into designs, into connections, into vision. And I did it in the shadows because I thought that's what love looked like. Support without recognition, sacrifice without acknowledgement. I was wrong." Simone leaned forward. "Are you saying the designs that made Pemberton Luxury famous were yours?" "I'm saying that success is never singular. It's a collaboration. But when only one person's name is on everything, when only one person takes the credit, when only one person reaps the rewards, while the other is called just a supportive wife, that's not collaboration. That's theft." The words hung in the air like smoke. Lindsay could imagine Richard somewhere watching this, choking on his expensive whiskey. "Strong words," Simone said. "Your ex-husband might disagree." "My ex-husband threw a $5 bill at me during our divorce," Lindsay said, pulling it out of her clutch and holding it up to the camera. The plastic sleeve caught the light. "He said, 'This is all I'm worth.' That I was just a wife standing behind him, adding nothing of value. That he built his empire alone. Simone's eyes widened. He said that to you? In front of his lawyers and his new fiancée, who happens to be wearing one of my designs in all her Instagram photos without knowing it. Lindsay smiled, and it was razor sharp. But here's what my ex-husband forgot. He didn't hand $5 to a victim. He handed it to a queen. And queens don't stay down. What are you going to do with that $5? This was it. The moment everything changed. I already did something with it, Lindsay said. I took this insult and turned it into capital. And now I'm announcing my new brand, Phoenix Rising. Ultra-luxury sustainable fashion with blockchain authentication. Every piece will be one of a kind, verified, impossible to counterfeit. And every design will bear my signature aesthetic. She paused, letting that sink in. Anyone in the industry would recognize what she meant. Her aesthetic. The one that had made Pemberton Luxury famous. We launch in 3 months, Lindsay continued. And I'm not hiding anymore. I'm not standing in the shadows, letting someone else take credit for my vision. This time, the world will know exactly who created what they're wearing. Simone was practically vibrating with excitement. This was the kind of interview that made careers. Where will you show? Paris Fashion Week. The same week Pemberton Luxury shows their spring collection. The audacity of it rippled through the studio. You could hear the collective intake of breath from the crew. That's a direct challenge, Simone said. That's a reckoning, Lindsay corrected. My ex-husband said I was nothing without him. I'm about to prove that he was everything because of me. And when his collection walks down that runway showing safe, derivative designs that his current team created without my input. And mine walks down showing the innovation and artistry that built his reputation. Everyone will know the truth. But starting a luxury brand requires tremendous resources. How are you funding this? Lindsay held up the $5 bill again. I started with this, through intelligence, strategy, and refusing to accept that my worth is determined by someone who couldn't see my value. I turned this into something substantial. I have investors now who believe in vision over ego. People who understand that the fashion industry is ready for disruption, for authenticity, for something real. Can you tell us who these investors are? Not yet, but they're not just investors. They're partners. Real partners, not people who will take credit for my work. This time I own my name, my designs, my future. Simone smiled. I think you just changed the conversation in fashion. Before we wrap, is there anything you want to say to your ex-husband? Lindsay looked directly into the camera, knowing Richard would see this, knowing it would kill him. Thank you, she said softly. Thank you for underestimating me. Thank you for humiliating me. Thank you for that $5 bill. Because you broke me down so completely that I had no choice but to rebuild myself into something you could never destroy. You didn't lose a supportive wife, Richard. You lost the person who made you relevant. And you're about to learn that lesson in the most public way possible. The interview ended. The cameras cut. And Simone stood up, extending her hand. That was extraordinary. You're going to be everywhere tomorrow. She was right. By midnight, clips of the interview were viral. Fashion blogs exploded. Social media lit up like wildfire. The hashtag Phoenix Rising was trending worldwide. And more importantly, Lindsay's phone began to ring. The first call came from a manufacturer in Italy. Giovanni, who had supplied Pemberton Luxury with their finest fabrics for 8 years. Lindsay, is that really you? His accent was thick with emotion. I watched the interview 3 times. I always knew it was you. The way you touched the fabrics when you visited. The way you understood the weave and the weight. Richard never cared about these things. It was always you. Giovanni, Lindsay said, her voice catching. I remember. You taught me about the silk from Como. And you taught me to take risks with unusual blends. Lindsay, I want to work with you. With Phoenix Rising. Whatever you need, I will provide. Better terms than I ever gave Richard. The second call was from Tokyo, Hiroshi, who ran the manufacturing facility that produced Pemberton Luxury's structured pieces. Miss Lamb, I apologize for not reaching out sooner. When I heard about the divorce, I wanted to contact you, but I did not know if it was appropriate. Your interview, it reminded me why I loved working with your company in the beginning. You understood craftsmanship. You respected our techniques. Mr. Pemberton, he only cares about profit margins now. Are you saying you want to work with Phoenix Rising? Lindsay asked, barely daring to hope. I'm saying my facility is yours if you want it. We can do things Richard would never approve. True innovation. True artistry. The calls kept coming. Suppliers Richard had relied on for years, all of them reaching out to the woman they had always known was the real genius. And with each call, Lindsay felt pieces of Richard's empire beginning to crack. But the most important call came at 2 a.m. Zara was asleep on the couch, and Lindsay was still riding the adrenaline high when her phone lit up with an unknown number. Miss Lamb? The voice was cultured, confident, American but with an international polish. My name is Charlie Dean. I hope you'll forgive the late hour, but I just finished watching your interview for the 3rd time, and I couldn't wait until morning to reach out. Who are you? Lindsay asked, though something in her chest was already beating faster. Someone who's been watching the fashion industry destroy itself with vanity and short-sightedness for 20 years. I built my career in ethical luxury goods, and your interview reminded me why I fell in love with this work in the first place. That $5 bill moment? That was fire. What do you want, Mr. Dean? Charlie, please. And I want to talk. I fly into New York tomorrow. Have dinner with me? Let me hear your vision for Phoenix Rising directly from you. If nothing else, you'll get a good meal and a conversation with someone who understands what you're trying to build. Why would you want to meet me? Lindsay asked, suspicion threading through her voice. She had learned not to trust powerful men bearing gifts. Because I'm tired of watching mediocre men take credit for brilliant women's work, Charlie said. And because your interview reminded me why I fell in love with fashion in the first place. It's not about the clothes, it's about the vision behind them, the story they tell, the revolution they spark. You're not just launching a brand, Miss Lamb, you're declaring war on an industry that's forgotten what matters. I want to hear more. Something in his voice made her pause. Not the words, but the way he said them, like he was genuinely curious, not trying to sell her something. Where and when? She asked. I'll text you the details. And Miss Lamb, that was one hell of an interview. Richard Pemberton has no idea what's coming for him. He hung up, and Lindsay sat in the dark apartment, that $5 bill still in her hand, and felt the future opening up before her like a runway. Tomorrow, she would meet this Charlie Dean and decide if he was genuine or just another man looking to exploit her talent. But tonight, she would savor this moment. The moment when she had stopped being invisible and started being inevitable. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, just an address and a time, and then, wear something that makes you feel powerful, not for me, for you. Lindsay smiled and looked over at Zara, who had woken up and was watching her with knowing eyes. Who was that? Zara asked. Either my next partner or my next mistake, Lindsay said, but I'm done playing it safe, so I guess we'll find out tomorrow. Chapter 4. The Exodus. The restaurant Charlie Dean chose was the kind of place that didn't have prices on the menu. Lindsay walked in wearing black, a dress of her own design that was all clean lines and dangerous elegance. She had pulled her hair back severely, showing off cheekbones that could cut glass. The hostess recognized her immediately, eyes widening in that way people's eyes had been widening all day. The interview had detonated across the fashion world. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing. 3 major fashion publications wanted profiles. 2 talk shows wanted interviews. And Richard had released a statement through his publicist calling her claims desperate fiction from a bitter ex-wife. She hadn't responded. She didn't need to. The truth would prove itself soon enough. Charlie Dean stood when he saw her, and for a moment, Lindsay forgot how to breathe. He was tall, with dark skin and silver threading through his close-cropped hair. Maybe 45, maybe 50. It was impossible to tell. He wore a suit that was clearly bespoke, but what struck her wasn't his appearance. It was the way he looked at her. Not at her body, not at her face, but at her eyes, like he was trying to see who she really was. "Lindsay Lamb," he said, extending his hand, "thank you for taking a chance on a late-night phone call from a stranger." His handshake was firm, confident, brief, not trying to impress or dominate, just acknowledging her presence as an equal. "Your message said to wear something that makes me feel powerful," Lindsay said as they sat. "That's either very insightful or a good line you use on everyone." Charlie laughed, genuine and warm. "Guilty of using it before, but I've never meant it more than I do right now. That dress is extraordinary. Your design? Everything I wear is my design now. I'm done advertising for companies that don't deserve me." "Good. You should be." He signaled the waiter, ordered wine without asking her preference, then caught himself. "I'm sorry, that was presumptuous. Do you prefer—" "The wine is fine," Lindsay interrupted, "but I appreciate you catching yourself. Most men don't." "Most men are idiots," Charlie said bluntly. "Present company previously included, but I'm trying to learn." The wine came, rich and red and probably worth more than the average person's car payment. Charlie raised his glass. "To queens who refuse to stay down," he said. They drank, and Lindsay felt the warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just the wine. It was the way he had said queens, like it was simply a fact. "Tell me about Phoenix Rising," Charlie said. "Not the pitch, not what you told Simone Baptiste. Tell me what you actually want to build." Lindsay set down her glass. She had prepared a speech, a carefully crafted vision statement designed to attract investors. But something in Charlie's eyes made her throw it away and tell the truth instead. "I want to build something that matters," she said quietly. "Richard's company is all surface. Beautiful clothes that mean nothing, cost too much, and destroy the environment in their creation. He chases trends instead of setting them. He values profit over artistry. I want to do the opposite. I want to create pieces that last, that mean something, that are made ethically and authenticated through technology so no one can ever steal them or fake them. I want to prove that fashion can be revolutionary and responsible at the same time." Charlie listened without interrupting, his attention complete and focused in a way that made her feel like she was the only person in the world. "And the revenge?" he asked when she finished. "Is that part of the vision or separate from it?" "Honest question deserves an honest answer," Lindsay said. "The revenge is fuel. It's what got me out of bed after he destroyed me. It's what kept me awake redesigning vintage pieces for weeks straight. But it's not the endgame. The endgame is building something so good, so undeniable, that his company becomes a footnote in fashion history, the place Phoenix Rising emerged from." "That's what I hoped you'd say." Charlie leaned back in his chair, studying her. "I've built 3 companies from the ground up, sold 2 of them for enough money that I never have to work again. Kept the 3rd because I loved it too much to let go. And the thing I've learned is that revenge makes a great match, but purpose builds empires. You have both." "What's your 3rd company?" Lindsay asked. "Sustainable luxury goods, everything from furniture to accessories, all made from reclaimed or ethical materials, all designed to last generations. We're in 40 countries, valued somewhere around 2 billion. Though honestly, I stopped paying attention to the numbers years ago. What matters is we're proving you don't have to destroy the planet to make beautiful things." Lindsay felt her pulse quicken. "That's exactly what I want to do with fashion." "I know. That's why I called you at 2 in the morning instead of waiting like a normal person." He pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then turned it to face her. "These are my manufacturing facilities, 14 locations across Europe, Asia, and South America. all of them operating under strict ethical guidelines, all of them capable of producing luxury fashion. They're yours if you want them. Mine? For Phoenix Rising. I'm offering partnership, Lindsay. You design, you control the vision, you own the brand. I provide the infrastructure, the distribution networks, the retail relationships. We split profits 60-40 in your favor. You maintain creative control, absolutely. I advise, I support, but I never override. If we disagree, your voice wins. It was too good, too perfect. Lindsay had learned that when something seemed too perfect, it usually hid poison. What do you get out of this? She asked, suspicion sharpening her voice. Charlie's smile was rueful. Fair question. What I get is the chance to be part of something that matters. I'm bored, Lindsay. I've been bored for 5 years. I've made my money, proved my point, won my wars. But watching your interview, seeing that fire in your eyes when you held up that $5 bill, I remembered what it felt like to fight for something bigger than myself. I want that feeling again, and I want to watch you destroy the man who thought you were worthless. That's not a business strategy, Lindsay said. No, it's not, but it's honest. Charlie leaned forward, his eyes intense. I could give you all the logical reasons. Phoenix Rising aligns with my brand values. The blockchain authentication angle is innovative. The sustainable luxury market is primed for disruption. All of that is true. But the real reason I'm here is because I watched a brilliant woman get erased by a mediocre man, and I'm in a position to help her write a different ending. So I'm offering. Take it or leave it. But know that this offer comes with no strings, no hidden agendas, no expectation of anything beyond partnership. Lindsay studied him, looking for the lie, the angle, the trap. She found none. What she found instead was something more dangerous, sincerity. I need to think about it, she said. Take all the time you need. Charlie signaled for the check. But while you're thinking, let me tell you what's happening right now to Richard's company. What do you mean? I mean, your interview didn't just go viral with consumers. It went nuclear in the industry. I've been making calls all day, talking to people I know in manufacturing and retail. Giovanni called you already, didn't he? And Hiroshi? Lindsay nodded, surprised he knew. They're not the only ones. 5 more. Suppliers have contacted me today, asking if I know how to reach you. They all want out of their contracts with Pemberton Luxury. Richard's been burning bridges for years, treating people like they're disposable. They stayed because his company was successful, but now that they know you were the secret ingredient, they want to work with the real talent. That will destroy his production capabilities, Lindsay breathed. It gets better, Charlie said, a wicked gleam in his eye. 3 of his board members called me. Not to invest in Phoenix Rising, though they'd love to. They called to ask my advice on forcing Richard out of his own company. Apparently, there's been concern for a while that quality's declining, that his design vision has become stale. Your interview gave them the explanation they needed. They're preparing a vote of no confidence. Lindsay sat back, stunned. She had hoped to hurt Richard's reputation, maybe steal some of his suppliers. But this was total collapse. How do you know all this? She asked. Because I've been in this world for 20 years, and I've built relationships based on respect, not fear. When people trust you, they tell you things. They ask for advice. They share information. Richard never learned that. He thought power meant making people afraid of him. But fear breeds resentment, and resentment waits for the first opportunity to strike back. You gave them that opportunity. Their food arrived, but Lindsay barely tasted it. Her mind was racing, calculating possibilities, seeing the path forward with sudden clarity. If his board forces him out, she said slowly, the company collapses. Not necessarily. They could bring in new leadership, rebrand, try to salvage what's left. But without Richard, and without you, Pemberton Luxury is just another overpriced clothing company with no soul. They'll limp along for a while, then get bought by some conglomerate and turned into mall brand. Either way, Richard's legacy dies. But that's not enough, Lindsay said, the words surprising her as she spoke them. I don't want his company to just fade away. I want it to die, knowing it could never be what Phoenix Rising becomes. I want him to watch me succeed so completely that his name becomes synonymous with failure, with arrogance, with the cost of underestimating the woman who made you everything. Charlie's smile was slow and approving. Now you're thinking like a queen. So here's what I propose. We don't just take his suppliers, we don't just take his manufacturers. We take his vision for Paris Fashion Week and we make it ours. We show the world what those designs were supposed to be when you were still creating them. We launch Phoenix Rising as the company Pemberton Luxury could have been if Richard had been smart enough to make you a true partner. That's war, Lindsay whispered. That's justice, Charlie corrected. And I'm offering you the army to win it. Lindsay looked at the man across from her, this stranger who had appeared in her life at exactly the right moment with exactly the right resources. Part of her still waited for the catch, the moment when his true motives would reveal themselves as selfish or controlling. But another part, the part that had woken up when Richard threw that $5 bill, the part that had turned $5 into a revolution, that part recognized something in Charlie Dean. An ally, maybe more. All right, she said finally. Let's be partners. Charlie extended his hand across the table, and when Lindsay took it, she felt electricity spark between them. Not romantic, not yet, but something equally powerful. Recognition, the meeting of two people who understood what it meant to fight for something bigger than themselves. To Phoenix Rising, Charlie said. To revenge, Lindsay answered. To both, Charlie agreed. Because the best revenge is building something so extraordinary that it makes your enemies irrelevant. They shook, and the deal was done. No lawyers, no contracts, just two people who saw in each other the possibility of revolution. As they left the restaurant, Charlie handed her a folder. Information on our facilities, our contacts, our resources, everything you need to start planning. I'll have my lawyers draw up the partnership agreement based on the terms I outlined. You have your own lawyer review it, change anything you want. This is your company, Lindsay. I'm just here to help you build it. Why do I feel like I just made a deal with the devil? Lindsay asked, but she was smiling, because smart people are suspicious of gifts, Charlie said. But I'm not the devil. I'm just a man who's tired of watching brilliant people get crushed by mediocre ones. And I'm very good at helping them fight back. He got into a car that had appeared as if by magic, and Lindsay stood on the sidewalk clutching the folder, feeling the foundation of her new life solidifying beneath her feet. Her phone buzzed. A text from Zara. Well, is he legit, or do I need to start Googling him for red flags? Lindsay typed back, he's either the best thing that's happened to me or the biggest risk I've ever taken. Either way, we're doing this. 3 dots appeared, then, that's my girl. Come home and tell me everything. But before Lindsay could hail a cab, her phone rang. Unknown number, she answered. You bitch! Richard's voice was venomous, slurred with alcohol. You absolute bitch. Do you know what you've done? Do you have any idea what your little interview stunt cost me? Every penny you stole from me, Lindsay said calmly. Every ounce of credit you took that wasn't yours. Every moment you made me feel small and worthless. That's what it cost you, Richard. And I'm just getting started. I'll destroy you, he hissed. I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. You can't destroy what you never truly saw, Lindsay said. And you can't threaten someone who's already lost everything and built it back stronger. Enjoy your empire while it lasts, Richard. Because by Paris Fashion Week, everyone will know the truth. You were never the designer. You were just the man who was smart enough to marry one, and stupid enough to throw her away. She hung up before he could respond, and stood there on the street, shaking not with fear, but with exhilaration. The war had officially begun, and this time she was going to win. Chapter 5. The perfect storm. The studio smelled like creation. Lindsay stood in the center of what had once been an abandoned warehouse in Brooklyn, now transformed into the headquarters of Phoenix Rising. Fabric samples covered every surface, sketches pinned to walls, half-finished garments hanging on dress forms like ghosts waiting to be born. Around her, a team of 12 worked with focused intensity. These weren't just employees. They were believers. Charlie had helped her find them. The pattern maker, who had been fired from Pemberton Luxury for suggesting more sustainable practices. The seamstress who had quit after Richard screamed at her for a minor imperfection. The fabric specialist, who had been passed over for promotion 7 times because she was a woman. Each one had a story. Each one had been wounded by the industry's casual cruelty, and each one had come to Phoenix Rising, hungry for revolution. The silk arrived from Giovanni, Zara called out, wheeling in a rack of fabric that shimmered like liquid moonlight. She had officially joined the company as creative director, her modeling connections proving invaluable. "He sent twice what you ordered. Says it's a gift." His way of apologizing for staying silent all those years. Lindsay ran her fingers across the silk, feeling its weight and texture. Perfect. Everything was coming together with an ease that felt almost supernatural. Or maybe it wasn't supernatural at all. Maybe this was what happened when you finally stopped fighting against your own brilliance. Her phone buzzed. A message from Charlie. "How's the collection coming? Need anything?" She smiled. He checked in daily, but never demanded to see the work. Trusted her completely. It was intoxicating being trusted like this, being seen as capable rather than decorative. "It's perfect," she typed back. "Thank you for believing in this. I don't believe in this. I believe in you. There's a difference." Lindsay stared at the message longer than necessary, feeling something warm bloom in her chest. She pushed it down. There would be time for feelings later. Right now, there was work. The launch date was set for Paris Fashion Week, deliberately scheduled for the same evening as Pemberton Luxury's show. The fashion world was buzzing with anticipation. Some called it audacious, others called it suicide. Lindsay called it necessary. But Phoenix Rising wasn't just launching at Paris Fashion Week. Charlie had arranged something bigger, a pop-up exhibition in Manhattan, timed perfectly with Richard's seasonal release. Celebrity stylists had been given early access to Phoenix designs, and the response had been electric. 3 major actresses had already committed to wearing Phoenix Rising to upcoming award shows. "Lindsay," called out Jade, the pattern maker. "The structured jacket isn't sitting right. Can you look?" Lindsay crossed to where Jade worked, examining the garment with critical eyes. The problem revealed itself immediately. The shoulder seam was 2 millimeters too far back. Such a small error, but it changed everything. "Here," Lindsay said, adjusting the fabric. "The line needs to flow from here to here, see? It's about the body's natural movement, not forcing it into an unnatural shape." Jade nodded, understanding, lighting her face. "That's what was missing at Pemberton. We were always forcing shapes. This feels like the fabric wants to do this." "Because it does," Lindsay said. "Good design works with materials, not against them." Richard never understood that. He wanted to dominate everything, even silk. Her phone rang. A known number, but she answered anyway. Too much was happening to screen calls. "Lindsay Lamb." The voice was crisp, professional, female. "My name is Diane Thornhill. I'm the retail director for Maison Beaumont." Lindsay's breath caught. Maison Beaumont was one of the most prestigious luxury retailers in the world. Their flagship stores in Paris, Milan, Tokyo, and New York were temples of high fashion. "I'm listening," Lindsay said carefully. "I saw your interview. I've been following Phoenix Rising's development through industry channels. I want to carry your collection, exclusively for the first season. Every major city, prime placement, full marketing support. I'm prepared to make a substantial initial order." "Why?" Lindsay asked. "You carry Pemberton Luxury. This puts you in direct competition with one of your existing brands." Diane laughed, sharp and knowing. "Let me be frank. We've been trying to drop Pemberton Luxury for 2 years. Quality has declined, designs are stale, and Richard is impossible to work with. But we needed a replacement first, something that could fill that space in our luxury contemporary section. Phoenix Rising is that replacement. Sustainable, innovative, and with a story that customers will connect with emotionally. That $5 bill, genius. People love a comeback story. I'm not a comeback story, Lindsay said quietly. I'm a reckoning. Even better, Diane replied. So do we have a deal? Send me the contract. I'll have my lawyer review it. Already in your email. And Lindsay, we're dropping Pemberton Luxury announcement goes live tomorrow. Thought you'd like to know. The call ended and Lindsay stood frozen, phone still pressed to her ear. Maison Beaumont was dropping Richard. His products would be pulled from some of the most influential stores in the world. The implications were devastating. Good news? Zara asked, noticing Lindsay's expression. We just won, Lindsay said softly. I mean, we haven't shown the collection yet. We haven't even launched. But we just won. She explained about Maison Beaumont, and the studio erupted in celebration. Champagne appeared from somewhere. Someone turned on music. For a moment the work stopped and they just existed in the joy of victory. But Lindsay's phone was ringing again. And again. And again. More retailers wanted in. Boutiques she had only dreamed of approaching were calling her. Department stores, specialty shops, online platforms. Everyone wanted Phoenix Rising, and with each conversation she heard the same subtext. They were done with Richard Pemberton. By evening, Phoenix Rising had commitments from 23 major retailers across 12 countries. The collection hadn't even debuted yet, and they had already secured more distribution than most brands achieved in 5 years. Charlie called just after sunset. Have you seen the news? Which news? Lindsay asked. There was so much news today, she couldn't keep track. Richard fired his entire design team, publicly blamed them for declining quality, says he's going back to basics, designing everything himself again. Lindsay closed her eyes, imagining Richard's panic. He had built his reputation on her work, then coasted on the talent of the team he assembled. Now faced with losing everything, he thought he could recapture the magic alone. He couldn't, he never had that magic. It had always been borrowed. He's going to fail, she said. Spectacularly, Charlie agreed. His board is furious. Stock dropped 6% today. And that's before Maison Beaumont's announcement hits tomorrow. Lindsay, you're destroying him without even trying. I'm not trying to destroy him, Lindsay said, surprising herself with the truth of it. I'm trying to build something beautiful. If he gets destroyed in the process, that's just consequence. That's even better, Charlie said, his voice warm with approval. Revenge, motivated by creation rather than destruction. That's how you know you've already won. They talked for another hour, Charlie updating her on production timelines and shipping logistics while Lindsay shared details about the collection. Their conversations had become the highlight of her days. He listened in a way Richard never had, asked questions that showed he understood not just fashion, but her vision for it. I should let you get back to work, Charlie said finally. But Lindsay, I'm proud of you. I know that's presumptuous. We've only been partners for a short time, but I am. You took an insult and turned it into an empire. That's extraordinary. After they hung up, Lindsay stood at the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Richard was panicking. Isabella was probably scrolling through social media, oblivious to the collapse happening around her. His board was plotting. His retailers were abandoning him. Everything he had built on stolen credit was crumbling, and Lindsay felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph, not even anger, just clarity. She had spent so many years defining herself in relation to Richard. His wife, his supporter, his victim. Even her revenge had been about him. But standing here, surrounded by her team, her designs, her vision made real, she realized something profound. This wasn't about Richard anymore. Maybe it never had been. This was about her finally becoming who she was always meant to be. Lindsay? Jade approached, holding a finished garment. The centerpiece of the collection, an evening gown that incorporated traditional tailoring with sustainable innovation. It's done. Lindsay took the dress, held it up to the light. The silk caught every nuance of shadow and illumination. The structure was flawless, and the details were exquisite. This was what fashion should be. Art that you could wear. Beauty that didn't cost the earth everything. It's perfect, she whispered. No, Jade said, smiling. You're perfect. This is just proof. That night, as her team finally went home and the studio fell quiet, Lindsay pulled out that $5 bill. She looked at it, really looked at it, this scrap of paper that had changed everything. Richard thought he had insulted her. He thought he had defined her worth. But all he had done was give her fuel, and she had burned so bright with it that she had lit up the entire industry. Paris Fashion Week was 3 weeks away. The Phoenix Rising collection was nearly complete, and Richard Pemberton's empire was already ashes. The perfect storm wasn't coming. It was already here. Chapter 6. The Proposal Rejected. The rooftop garden was Charlie's idea. He had texted Lindsay after another brutal 18-hour workday. You need air that doesn't smell like fabric. Roof of my building, bring nothing but yourself. She almost said no. There was too much work. Paris was 2 weeks away. Every minute counted, but something in the invitation made her hesitate. Not the words, but what lived beneath them. An offering of peace in the middle of war. So she went. Charlie's building was in Manhattan, one of those converted industrial spaces that managed to be both luxurious and understated. The rooftop garden was unexpected, not manicured and sterile, but wild and alive. Vegetables grew in raised beds, flowers spilled over their containers, and string lights hung overhead like captured stars. Charlie stood by a table set for two, wearing jeans and a simple shirt. It was the first time Lindsay had seen him out of a suit. He looked younger, more relaxed, more real. This is unexpected, Lindsay said, taking in the garden. I needed something living, Charlie explained. After years of building companies, managing investments, making everything transactional, I needed dirt under my fingernails and things that grew because they wanted to, not because I paid them to. He pulled out her chair, and they sat. The food was simple. Fresh vegetables from the garden, bread from a bakery downstairs, wine that tasted like summer. But the simplicity was its own luxury. You've been working yourself to death, Charlie said. Zara told me you slept at the studio 3 nights this week. Zara needs to mind her business, Lindsay replied, but there was no heat in it. She's worried. I'm worried. Don't be. I'm fine. Charlie leaned back, studying her in that way he had, like he could see past her defenses to the truth beneath. You're exceptional. But even exceptional people need rest. I'll rest after Paris. And then what? After you've conquered Paris, what's the next thing you'll tell yourself you need to accomplish before you're allowed to breathe? The question landed harder than Lindsay expected. She set down her wineglass carefully. Is there a point to this conversation? Yes, Charlie said simply. The point is, I'm watching someone I care about burn herself out in the name of revenge that she's already achieved. You won, Lindsay. Richard's company is collapsing. You've got retail commitments that most brands would kill for. Your collection is extraordinary. You've already proven everything you set out to prove. So why are you still running like something's chasing you? Because stopping means thinking, Lindsay said, the words escaping before she could catch them. And thinking means feeling. And feeling means acknowledging that I wasted 10 years of my life on someone who saw me as disposable. That I let myself become invisible because I thought that's what love required. That I'm terrified this success is temporary, and any second it could all disappear, and I'll be back to being worthless again. The confession hung in the air between them. Lindsay wanted to take it back, stuff it down, pretend she hadn't just revealed the fear that woke her at 3 in the morning. But Charlie's expression stopped her. Not pity, understanding. You were never worthless, he said quietly. You were just surrounded by people who couldn't see your value. That's their failure, not yours. How do you know? Lindsay asked. How do you know I'm not just lucky? That this isn't all just circumstance and timing, and I'll wake up one day and realize I don't actually have any talent? Charlie reached across the table and took her hand. The touch was gentle but grounding. Because I've spent 20 years in this industry. I've seen real talent and I've seen fraud. I've watched brilliant people self-destruct and mediocre people fail upward. And Lindsay, you're not lucky. You're gifted. The collection you've created isn't circumstance. It's genius. The way you understand fabric and form and function. The way you can see what fashion should be, rather than what it is. That's not something you can fake. Lindsay felt tears threatening and blinked them back fiercely. She had cried enough in Richard's office. She wouldn't cry now. "Thank you," she whispered. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the city sounds drifting up from below. Lindsay felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. When was the last time she had just existed without purpose or agenda? When had she last allowed herself to be present in a moment? "Tell me about your first company," Lindsay said, wanting to shift focus away from herself. "The one you built from nothing." Charlie smiled, recognizing the deflection but allowing it. "I was 26 and absolutely certain I knew everything. Started with sustainable furniture made from reclaimed wood. Everyone said it wouldn't work, that people wanted new and shiny, not old and repurposed. I proved them wrong through pure stubbornness and refusing to compromise on vision." "Sounds familiar," Lindsay said. "We're similar, you and I. Both of us had something to prove. Both of us refused to accept that our worth was determined by other people's limited imagination." He paused, his expression shifting to something more vulnerable. "But there's one difference. I learned to let people in. You're still keeping everyone at arm's length." "That's not true," Lindsay protested. "I have Zara, my team. You have colleagues and a friend," Charlie interrupted gently. "But you don't have someone who sees all of you and stays anyway. Someone who knows your fears and your failures and doesn't run. Someone who isn't just there for the victory, but for the vulnerability too." The words created a silence that felt heavy with meaning. Lindsay looked at Charlie, really looked at him, and saw what she had been deliberately not seeing for weeks. The way his eyes followed her when she wasn't looking. The way he found excuses to check in. The way he said her name like it mattered. But she also remembered something from earlier that week. A meeting with the production team where Charlie had overridden one of her fabric choices, calling a supplier directly without consulting her first. He'd apologized later, said he was just trying to help expedite things, but it had felt like Richard. Just for a moment, that impulse to take control, to decide what was best without asking. "Charlie," she started. "I'm falling in love with you," he said, cutting her off. "I have been since that first dinner, when you explained what you wanted to build. Maybe even since I watched your interview and saw that fire in your eyes. I know the timing is terrible. I know you're focused on Paris. I know you just got out of a marriage that destroyed you. But I can't keep pretending I'm just your business partner when every day I want to be more than that." Lindsay's heart was racing. Part of her wanted to lean across the table and kiss him. Part of her wanted to run. All of her was terrified. "I can't," she said, her voice barely audible. "Charlie, I can't do this." "Why not?" "Because I don't trust it. Last week, you called that fabric supplier without asking me. You made a decision about my collection without consulting me. And I know you were trying to help. I know you apologized, but it reminded me of Richard. How it starts small. How someone who loves you starts making choices for you because they think they know better. And I can't," her voice cracked, "I can't go back to being someone who disappears into someone else's vision." Charlie's face showed something that looked like pain mixed with understanding. "You're right. I did overstep, and I've done it before in other relationships. I get so focused on solving problems that I forget to ask if my help is wanted. It's why my last relationship ended. She said I was suffocating her with competence." He met Lindsay's eyes. "But I'm trying to learn. That's why I apologized. That's why I'm telling you this now, instead of pretending I'm perfect. I'm not asking you to disappear into me, Lindsay. I'm asking if you'll risk teaching me how to love you the right way." Charlie didn't let go of her hand. "I'm not asking you to need me. I'm asking you to let yourself want something that isn't revenge or vindication. I'm asking you to consider that maybe you deserve happiness that isn't contingent on someone else's failure. I don't know how to do that, Lindsay admitted. I don't know how to be with someone and not disappear into them. Then don't be with me, Charlie said. Be yourself, and let me be lucky enough to exist in your orbit. No expectations, no demands. Just two people who enjoy each other's company and see where it goes. It was perfect. Too perfect. Lindsay pulled her hand back gently. I'm sorry, she said. I can't, not now. Maybe not ever. You deserve someone who can give you more than I have to offer. Charlie's face showed pain, but he nodded. I understand. And Lindsay, this doesn't change our partnership. You don't owe me anything. Phoenix Rising is still yours. Our agreement stands, and I'll still be here supporting your vision. That was never contingent on you returning my feelings. Why are you so good? Lindsay asked, frustrated tears finally escaping. I'm not good, Charlie said softly. I'm just a man who's learned that you can't build something real on obligation or guilt. You either choose me freely or you don't choose me at all. And if you don't, I'll survive. I've survived worse. He walked her to her car, and they parted with an awkward hug that felt like goodbye to something that never quite began. As Lindsay drove away, she watched him in the rearview mirror, standing alone in the parking garage, and felt something crack in her chest. She had been so focused on not being vulnerable that she had forgotten how to accept good things when they were offered. Charlie wasn't Richard. He had proven that a dozen times over. But fear didn't care about proof. Fear just knew that the last time she had loved someone, it had cost her everything. Zara was still awake when Lindsay got back to the studio, reviewing fabric orders. How was dinner with Charlie? She asked innocently. He told me he's in love with me. Zara's head snapped up. And I told him I can't do this, that I'm not ready, that I don't trust it, that he should find someone better. Girl, Zara set down her clipboard. Are you serious right now? What was I supposed to say? Yes, let's start a relationship right before the biggest moment of my career. What happens when it falls apart and I've tied my business to a man I can't stand to be around? What happens when you push away something real because you're too scared to try again? Zara countered. Lindsay, I've watched you become this fierce, powerful force these past months. You took on an entire industry and won, but you're still letting Richard control you by letting his betrayal make you afraid of everyone else. That's not fair. It's completely fair. Charlie isn't Richard. He's proven that every single day. He trusts you, supports you, believes in you. And you're throwing it away because what? Because one man failed you, so now all men are suspect? Lindsay sank into a chair. What if I lose myself again? What if I get comfortable and forget who I am? Then I'll remind you, Zara said simply. That's what friends do. But Lindsay, you can't punish every future relationship for one man's sins. At some point, you have to decide if you're going to let Richard win by making you too afraid to ever be happy again. The words settled over Lindsay like snow. Quiet, cold, undeniable. She had spent months building armor, becoming untouchable, turning herself into something hard and sharp and dangerous. And it had worked. She had won. But somewhere in the process of making herself unbreakable, she had forgotten how to bend. I'll think about it, Lindsay said finally. Don't think too long, Zara warned. Good men don't wait forever. That night, alone in her temporary apartment, Lindsay lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She thought about Charlie's hands in the garden soil, about the way he said her name, about the vulnerability in his eyes when he admitted his feelings, about how it felt to be seen completely and not found wanting. And she thought about Richard, about how she had made herself small for him, how she had believed that love meant sacrifice and invisibility and constant accommodation. But Charlie wasn't asking her to be small. He was asking her to be brave in a different way, to risk something that wasn't money or reputation, but heart. She wasn't ready. Not tonight, maybe not for a while. But for the first time since Richard had thrown that $5 bill at her, Lindsay allowed herself to want something that wasn't revenge. She allowed herself to want love. Real, terrifying, risky love. And that, she realized, might be the biggest act of rebellion yet. Chapter 7. The Crisis and the Night. The text came at 3 in the morning. Problem. Call me immediately. Charlie. Lindsay was already awake, had been awake for hours, working on final adjustments to the collection. Paris Fashion Week was in 5 days. Every minute mattered. She called him back. What's wrong? She asked, already mentally cataloguing disasters. The shipping container with half your collection was held at customs in Le Havre. Some kind of documentation issue. They're saying it could be delayed up to 2 weeks. Lindsay's blood went cold. 2 weeks meant missing Fashion Week entirely. Missing their moment. Missing everything. That's impossible, she said. We filed everything correctly. I had 3 different people verify the paperwork. I know, which is why I think this isn't an accident. Charlie's voice was grim. I've dealt with French customs before. This kind of delay doesn't just happen. Someone pulled strings. Richard, Lindsay breathed, can't prove it, but the timing is awfully convenient. His show is in 6 days. Yours was supposed to be in 5. If your collection doesn't arrive, you can't show. Lindsay stood up, pacing her apartment, mind racing through options and solutions. Can we reroute? Send it somewhere else? We've already tried. Once it's held, it has to clear at the original port. But I have people working on it. Friends in the French government. Customs brokers who owe me favors. We'll get it released. When? Charlie hesitated. 48 hours minimum. Maybe 72. That gives us 2 days before the show. That's not enough time for fitting, adjustments, rehearsal. I know, which is why we need a backup plan. There is no backup plan, Lindsay said, hearing her voice crack. The collection is the plan. Without it, Phoenix Rising dies before it's even born. Then we make a new plan, Charlie said firmly. How much of the collection is already in Paris? Lindsay forced herself to think through panic. About 40%. The pieces that were too delicate to risk in shipping, the ones we hand-carried. But it's not enough for a full show. Then we do a partial show. We make it about quality over quantity. Intimate, exclusive, revolutionary. We turn the limitation into a statement. That's insane. So was turning $5 into a fashion empire, Charlie countered. Lindsay, listen to me. You've overcome every obstacle that's been thrown at you. This is just one more. And I'm not letting you give up now. Something in his voice steadied her. The absolute certainty. The refusal to accept failure. All right, she said. I'm on the next flight to Paris. We'll figure this out. I'm already at the airport. Meet me at the gate. 8 hours later, Lindsay stood in the Parisian atelier they had rented, looking at the partial collection with exhausted eyes. The pieces were beautiful, but there weren't enough of them. Not for the kind of statement they needed to make. Charlie was on his phone, speaking rapid French to someone, his voice getting increasingly frustrated. Zara had flown in with the team, and they were all looking at Lindsay with a mixture of hope and desperation. We need 18 more pieces minimum, Jade said quietly. That's the industry standard for a debut collection show. We have 11. Then we make 7 more, Lindsay said. In 3 days? That's impossible. Everything about this has been impossible, Lindsay snapped. Then softer. I'm sorry. I'm tired. We're all tired, Zara said. But Jade's right. We can't manufacture 7 complete pieces in 3 days, even if we worked around the clock. Charlie hung up his phone and his face was ashen. I need to talk to you, he said to Lindsay. Alone. They stepped outside into the Parisian evening. Charlie leaned against the wall, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked defeated. I can get the container released, he said quietly. But it's going to cost me everything I've been building for the past 2 years. What do you mean? There's a deal, a major acquisition I've been negotiating. It would triple my company's reach, cement my legacy. The French partner on that deal has the connections to clear your shipment immediately. But he wants my stake in the acquisition as payment. If I give it up, I lose years of work. If I don't, you lose Phoenix Rising. Lindsay felt the breath leave her lungs. Charlie, you can't. That's your future. No, Charlie said, meeting her eyes. You're my future. This company I'm building, it's just business. But what you're doing, it matters. It changes things. And I'm not going to let some customs bureaucrat destroy it because I was too selfish to make a sacrifice. This isn't about selfishness, Lindsay protested. This is about you destroying years of your own work for my dream. Our dream, Charlie corrected. And I've already made the call. The container will be here tomorrow afternoon. 36 hours before your show. Lindsay stared at him, tears streaming down her face. Why would you do that? Because I love you, Charlie said simply. And love isn't about grand gestures. It's about choosing someone else's dream over your own and never regretting it for a second. Lindsay laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. This is insane. This whole thing is insane. Welcome to fashion, Jade said dryly. They worked through the night and into the next day. When the container finally arrived, Lindsay wanted to cry with relief. Everything was intact, undamaged, perfect. They had 34 hours until the show, 34 hours to fit the pieces on models, to choreograph the presentation, to handle 1,000 tiny details that could each individually destroy everything, to make Phoenix Rising's debut flawless. Lindsay worked until her vision blurred and her hands shook. Charlie appeared at her elbow periodically with food she didn't remember eating, coffee she didn't remember drinking. The team rotated in shifts, but Lindsay refused to sleep. You need rest, Charlie said at hour 26. I need this to be perfect, Lindsay replied. It already is perfect. You're perfect. Now you need to trust that and step back before you collapse. I can't collapse. There's too much. Lindsay, Charlie took her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. You've done everything you can. The collection is extraordinary. The show will be extraordinary. But if you don't sleep, you'll be too exhausted to enjoy your victory. What if it's not a victory? She whispered. What if I fail? Then you fail having tried something spectacular. But you won't fail. I know you won't, not because you're lucky, but because you're brilliant. Because every piece in this collection shows a vision that the fashion world has been starving for. Because you took everything Richard tried to destroy and turned it into art. You've already won, Lindsay. Tomorrow is just the world catching up. She wanted to argue, but exhaustion was winning. Charlie guided her to a couch in the corner of the atelier, covered her with his jacket, and sat beside her. Just for an hour, Lindsay mumbled. Just for an hour, Charlie agreed. When she woke, light was streaming through the windows. She shot up in panic. What time is it? 6 hours before the show, Charlie said calmly. And everything is ready. The team handled the final details while you slept. The models are being prepped. The venue is set. All you need to do is breathe. Lindsay looked around the atelier. The collection hung in perfect order, each piece a masterwork. Her team was moving with calm efficiency, handling last-minute adjustments. Zara caught her eye and gave her a thumbs up. How long did you let me sleep? Lindsay asked Charlie. 8 hours. You needed it. I told you 1 hour. I lied. You're welcome. Lindsay should have been angry. Instead, she felt clarity returning, her mind sharp again, her hands steady. She turned to Charlie, really looked at him. He had dark circles under his eyes, stubble on his jaw. He hadn't slept at all. You stayed, she said softly. Of course I stayed. I told you I would support you. That doesn't stop just because you're sleeping. Something in Lindsay's chest cracked open. All the armor she had built, all the walls she had constructed to keep herself safe, they suddenly felt ridiculous. This man had flown across an ocean to help her solve a crisis, had bribed French officials, had let her sleep while he stayed awake to make sure everything was perfect, had asked for nothing in return. Charlie, she started, but he shook his head. Not now. You have a show to prepare for. We can talk after. No, Lindsay said firmly. Now, because I've been an idiot. Because you told me you were falling in love with me and I pushed you away because I was scared. Because I've been so focused on not being Richard's victim that I forgot how to accept good things. And you're a very good thing. Charlie went still. What are you saying? I'm saying I was wrong. On that rooftop, when I told you I couldn't do this. I was lying. Not to you, to myself. Because I can do this. I want to do this. I want to see where this goes. I want to be brave enough to risk my heart again. And I want to risk it with you. Lindsay. I'm terrified, she continued. I'm terrified I'll mess this up or lose myself or repeat all the mistakes I made with Richard. But I'm more terrified of pushing you away and spending the rest of my life wondering what could have been. So yes, if the offer still stands, if you're still interested in existing in my orbit and seeing where it goes, I'm saying yes. Charlie stood slowly, crossed to where she sat, and cupped her face in his hands. The offer will always stand. Today, tomorrow, 10 years from now, I'm not going anywhere. He kissed her, and Lindsay felt everything else fall away. The fear, the exhaustion, the pressure of the upcoming show. There was just this, just the feeling of being seen and chosen and valued for exactly who she was. We have terrible timing, she murmured against his lips. We have perfect timing, Charlie corrected. Right before you change the fashion world forever. That seems appropriate? Someone cleared their throat. They broke apart to find Zara standing there grinning like a fool. About damn time, she said. Now can you two stop being adorable and help me with these models? We have a show to put on. The next 5 hours were a blur. Makeup, hair, final fittings, 1,000 tiny adjustments. The venue filled with industry insiders, celebrities, journalists. Everyone who mattered in fashion had come to see Phoenix Rising's debut. Backstage, Lindsay stood with her team, looking at the collection one last time before it walked out into the world. Each piece represented something. Her pain, her resurrection, her refusal to accept that her worth was defined by someone who couldn't see her value. Nervous? Charlie asked, appearing at her side. Excited, Lindsay corrected. This is what I've been working for, what I've been fighting for, and it's perfect. You're perfect, Charlie said, taking her hand. The music started. The first model stepped onto the runway, and Phoenix Rising was born. The collection was a revelation. Each piece told a story, not just of design, but of sustainability, of innovation, of fashion that meant something beyond profit. The audience watched in stunned silence as garment after garment proved that luxury and responsibility weren't opposites, but partners. When the final model walked, the silence held for one perfect moment. Then the applause started. Not polite Fashion Week clapping, but genuine, sustained, standing ovation applause. Critics were wiping their eyes. Buyers were already on their phones. And Lindsay stood backstage, holding Charlie's hand, and finally let herself believe it. She had won. Chapter 8. The Triumph. The after-party was chaos. Everyone wanted to talk to Lindsay. Critics who had dismissed her interview as publicity-seeking now praised her vision. Buyers who had been skeptical now pressed business cards into her hands. Celebrities who had never heard of her now wanted to be dressed by Phoenix Rising exclusively. But Lindsay kept finding her eyes drawn to one corner of the room where Richard stood, alone, holding a drink and trying to look unbothered. He had come. Of course he had come. He couldn't resist seeing what she had built from the ruins of his cruelty. Isabella was notably absent, but that was a story for later. He looks miserable, Zara whispered, appearing at Lindsay's elbow with champagne. He should, Lindsay replied. His show was this morning. Have you heard any feedback? It was safe, boring. Exactly what you'd expect from a man trying to recapture past glory without the talent that created it in the first place. Several critics left early. One actually fell asleep in the front row. Lindsay should have felt satisfaction. Instead, she just felt tired. Richard looked smaller than she remembered, less powerful. Just a middle-aged man in an expensive suit who had lost everything because he couldn't see value when it was standing beside him. I need air, Lindsay said. She slipped out onto the terrace, Paris spreading before her like a promise. Behind her, the party continued. Ahead, the rest of her life waited. It was overwhelming in the best way. Congratulations. Richard's voice made her turn. He had followed her outside. Up close, he looked worse, thinner, older, defeated. "What do you want, Richard?" "To apologize," he said. "For everything. You were right. About all of it. The designs, the vision, the credit. It was yours. I took it and called it mine and destroyed us both in the process." "You didn't destroy me," Lindsay said quietly. "You tried, but I rebuilt myself better than I was before." "I know." He looked at the party through the glass doors. "They all know now too. Everyone knows I was nothing without you. The board forced me out last week. Pemberton Luxury is finished. They're selling to a conglomerate that's going to rebrand it entirely. My name, my legacy, everything I built, it's just gone." "No," Lindsay corrected. "Everything we built. And you threw it away when you threw me away." "Isabella left me," Richard continued as if Lindsay hadn't spoken. "She left me the day the board made their announcement. Went back to the athlete she was dating before me. Didn't even pack her things, just walked out. Just like I deserve." "Yes," Lindsay agreed. "Just like you deserve," Richard flinched. "I lost everything. My company, my wife, my reputation. I have nothing left." "You have exactly what you valued," Lindsay said. "Nothing. Because that's what you reduced me to, nothing. And now you get to know how that feels." "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Lindsay, I'm so sorry." "I don't forgive you," she said simply. "I don't forgive you, and I don't care that you're sorry. You had 10 years to see me, to value me, to treat me like a partner instead of an accessory. You chose not to. Now you get to live with the consequences of that choice. What am I supposed to do now?" Richard asked, and he sounded lost. Like a child. Like someone who had never had to face genuine consequences before. "I don't know and I don't care," Lindsay said. "Figure it out. Build something new. Take credit for your own work for once. Learn to be someone who creates value instead of stealing it. Or don't. None of it is my problem anymore." She started to walk back inside, but Richard grabbed her arm. "Wait, please. I know I don't deserve it, but can we talk? Really talk. About what I did. About how I can make this right." Lindsay looked at his hand on her arm, then at his face. She saw desperation there, need. The same need he had shown when his company was failing and she had saved it. He wanted her to save him again, to fix what he had broken, to make everything better because that's what she did. No, she pulled her arm free. "You can't make this right. There is no version of this where you apologize enough and I come back and fix your life. I'm not your wife anymore. I'm not your designer. I'm not your solution. I'm just someone you used to know who you treated terribly. And the only thing you can do now is leave me alone." "But, Lindsay?" Charlie appeared in the doorway. "Everything okay out here?" "Yes," Lindsay said, not looking away from Richard. Richard was just leaving. Richard looked between them, understanding dawning. "Him? You're with him now?" "I'm with myself," Lindsay said. "Charlie is just lucky enough to be part of that. Now get out of here, Richard. Go figure out who you are without someone else's talent to hide behind." Richard left, shoulders slumped, defeated. Lindsay watched him go and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity. Just acceptance that this chapter was finally, truly closed. Charlie came to stand beside her. "You okay?" "I'm perfect," Lindsay said and meant it. "Did you hear? Pemberton Luxury sold. Richard's out completely." "I heard. The board contacted me last week, actually. Asked if Phoenix Rising would be interested in acquiring certain assets. Manufacturing contracts, retail relationships." "What did you tell them?" "I told them I'd ask you," Charlie said. "It's your decision. Taking on those contracts would mean rapid expansion, more control over production. Better terms." Lindsay thought about it. "Taking pieces of Richard's empire and making them hers. It would be poetic. Full circle. The woman he dismissed, claiming everything he lost." "No," she said finally. "Phoenix Rising is built on something different, something authentic. I don't want his leftovers. I want to create something new." Charlie smiled. "That's what I hoped you'd say." They went back inside, and the party swallowed them. More congratulations, more offers, more people wanting pieces of her success. But through it all, Lindsay kept one hand in Charlie's, anchoring herself to something real. At midnight, Diane from Maison Beaumont pulled her aside. I need to tell you something before it goes public tomorrow. We're not just carrying Phoenix Rising exclusively. We're making you the face of our entire sustainable luxury initiative. Global campaign, unlimited budget, complete creative control. We want Phoenix Rising to define what ethical fashion means for the next decade. That's... Lindsay couldn't find words. Extraordinary, Diane finished. Because you're extraordinary. The offer includes a substantial partnership payment and profit-sharing arrangement. My lawyers will send details tomorrow, but I wanted you to hear it from me first. You've changed the conversation, Lindsay. Everyone else is just catching up. After Diane left, Charlie raised his glass to Phoenix rising from ashes and setting the whole world on fire. To revenge, Lindsay added. To revolution, Zara corrected. They drank, and Lindsay felt the weight of the past year settle into something like peace. She had started with $5 and rage. She was ending with an empire and love. The journey had been brutal, but the destination was beautiful. What are you thinking about? Charlie asked later as they stood on the terrace watching Paris sleep. I'm thinking about that $5 bill, Lindsay said. About how Richard thought he was insulting me. How he had no idea he was handing me the fuel for a revolution. Are you going to keep it? Forever, Lindsay said. Frame it, put it in my office with a plaque that says exactly what it cost him. What will the plaque say? Lindsay smiled, slow and dangerous. The cost of underestimating a queen. Everything. Chapter 9. The Reckoning. 3 months after Paris Fashion Week, Lindsay stood in her new office. Not just any office. The penthouse Richard had once owned, the one he had been forced to sell when Pemberton Luxury collapsed. She had bought it at auction for a fraction of what he paid, renovated it completely, and turned it into Phoenix Rising's headquarters. It felt like justice. The $5 bill hung on the wall behind her desk, encased in museum-quality glass, backlit so it glowed. The plaque beneath it read exactly what she had promised. The cost of underestimating a queen. Everything. Phoenix Rising had exceeded every projection. The Maison Beaumont partnership had launched globally. 3 celebrity endorsements had turned into 12. The sustainable blockchain authentication had been adopted industry-wide, and Lindsay had been named to every major fashion influence list, crowned the comeback story of the decade. Except it wasn't a comeback. It was a revealing. The world was finally seeing what had always been there. She was reviewing designs for the next collection when security called. Miss Lamb, there's a Richard Pemberton here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment. Lindsay's first instinct was to send him away. She had nothing left to say to Richard, but curiosity won. Send him up. Richard looked terrible. His suit was off the rack, poorly fitted. His hair needed cutting. He had lost weight in an unhealthy way, all hollow cheeks and desperate eyes. This was what rock bottom looked like. Thank you for seeing me, he said quietly. You have 5 minutes, Lindsay replied. She didn't offer him a seat. I'm broke, Richard said. Actually broke. The divorce from Isabella took what little I had left. I've been working retail jobs just to make rent. But I didn't come here for money or help. He took a shaky breath. I came here because I needed to say this to your face. You were right about everything. The designs, the vision, the credit. It was all yours. I took it and called it mine, and I destroyed the only real thing I ever had. Lindsay sat back in her chair, studying him. The confession sounded genuine. But was it enough? Could any apology erase 10 years of erasure? Why now? She asked. Why come here when you have nothing left? Richard looked around the office, his old office, seeing the ways she had transformed it. Because watching you succeed, seeing what you built from literally nothing, made me face something I've been avoiding my whole life. I'm mediocre, Lindsay. Without you, I'm nothing. I always was. Every award I accepted, every accolade, every moment of recognition, it was stolen from you. And I convinced myself I deserved it because I was too cowardly to admit the truth. What truth? That I was just a man who got lucky enough to marry a genius and stupid enough to think he could replace her. Richard's voice broke. I didn't come here to ask you to save me. I know I don't deserve that. I came here because I needed you to know that I finally understand what I lost. Not the company, not the success. You, the only person who ever saw potential in me when I had nothing. I don't see the best in you anymore, Lindsay said flatly. I see exactly what you are. A mediocre man who convinced himself he was special by stealing someone else's light. You're right. I am mediocre. Without you, I'm nothing. I always was. And I have to live with that knowledge every single day. Good, Lindsay said. You should. They sat in silence. Richard looked around the office, his old office, seeing the ways she had transformed it. Made it better. Made it hers. This was supposed to be mine, he said softly. This success, this recognition, this empire. I was supposed to be the king of fashion. You had your chance, Lindsay said. You had a brilliant partner who would have built something extraordinary with you. But you didn't want a partner. You wanted an accessory, a prop, someone to make you look good while you took all the credit. So you lost everything. Not because I took it from you, but because you never really had it to begin with. I know, Richard's voice broke. I know that now. I'd lost the only real thing I ever had. Lindsay reached into her desk drawer and pulled out that $5 bill. She held it up, letting it catch the light. Do you remember this? She asked. Every day, Richard whispered. You threw this at me and told me it was all I was worth. You wanted to humiliate me, to break me, to make sure I knew exactly how little I mattered. Lindsay stood slowly, walked around her desk until she was standing in front of Richard. But all you did was give me fuel. I took your insult and turned it into an empire. I took your cruelty and transformed it into creation. I took the worst moment of my life and made it the beginning of my best life. I'm sorry, Richard said again, tears streaming down his face. Lindsay looked at him crying and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, just the clarity that comes from complete emotional closure. I don't forgive you, she said. I don't forgive you because you don't deserve forgiveness. You deserve to live with the consequences of your choices, to understand that actions have repercussions, to know that the woman you destroyed rebuilt herself into something you could never touch. She walked to the door, opened it. Security will see you out. Don't come back here, Richard. You're not welcome in my space. You're not welcome in my life. You're not even welcome in my thoughts anymore. You're nothing to me. And that $5 bill, that's going to hang in my office forever, reminding me that the best revenge is success. That queens don't need validation from men who can't see their worth. That everything you tried to take from me, I rebuilt better and brighter and completely mine. Richard stood there, understanding the finality of the moment. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I finally see it, what I lost, who you were, who you've become. Lindsay reached into her pocket, pulled out her wallet, and extracted a $5 bill. She held it out to him. This is all you're worth, she said, echoing his words from that day in his office. You were just a man who happened to be smart enough to marry a designer and stupid enough to throw her away. I built my empire. You take this and figure out yours. Richard stared at the bill, then at her face, understanding dawning. The perfect reversal, the complete humiliation, the absolute reckoning. You didn't lose everything, Lindsay continued. You lost a queen. There's a difference. Everything can be rebuilt, but you can't unlose the one person who saw potential in you when no one else did. You can't undestroy the love of someone who would have given you the world if you just treated her like she mattered. So take your $5 and get out of my building. Security appeared, two large men who had been waiting in the hall. They escorted Richard out as he stood frozen, that $5 bill in his hand, finally understanding the magnitude of what he had lost. When the elevator doors closed on his face, Lindsay returned to her desk. Charlie appeared in the doorway moments later. He had been waiting, giving her space to handle Richard alone, but close enough to intervene if needed. How do you feel? He asked. Free, Lindsay said. For the first time since I met him, I feel completely free. Charlie crossed to her, pulled her into his arms. He looked broken. He was already broken, Lindsay said. I just stopped trying to fix him. Do you think he'll be okay? I think that's not my problem anymore, Lindsay replied. He's got $5. Let him see what he can build with it. Maybe he'll learn something. Maybe he won't. Either way, it's not my responsibility. They stood there, holding each other, watching the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, life continued. Inside, Lindsay finally felt at peace. I love you, Charlie said quietly. I love you too, Lindsay replied. And it felt easy, natural. Nothing like the way she had loved Richard, all sacrifice and silence. This was different. This was two equals choosing each other. What's next? Charlie asked. Next? Lindsay smiled. Next, we keep building. Next, we show the world that fashion can be beautiful and responsible. Next, we prove that the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's becoming so successful, they become irrelevant. And Richard is already irrelevant. He just didn't realize it until today. That night, Lindsay hosted a celebration dinner. Her team, her partners, her friends, everyone who had believed in Phoenix Rising when it was just $5 and a dream. They toasted to success, to revolution, to proving that brilliance will always rise no matter how deeply it's buried. And when Lindsay looked around the table, seeing faces of people who valued her, not for what she could do for them, but for who she was, she finally understood something profound. Richard hadn't just lost his company and his wife. He had lost the chance to be part of something extraordinary. He had lost the opportunity to build something meaningful with someone who would have fought beside him rather than for him, and that was a loss he could never recover from. The $5 bill would hang in her office forever, not as a reminder of pain, but as a testament to resilience, to the woman who took an insult and alchemized it into empire, to the queen who rose from ashes and set the world on fire. Chapter 10. The Crown. 6 months later, Lindsay stood at the altar. The wedding was small, intimate, everything she wanted it to be. None of the spectacle of her first marriage, no hundreds of guests who barely knew her name. Just the people who mattered. Zara as her maid of honor, tears streaming down her face. Her team from Phoenix Rising, the family she had chosen. And Charlie, waiting for her with eyes full of love and respect and partnership. You look stunning, Zara whispered, adjusting Lindsay's veil. The dress was her own design, naturally. Sustainable silk that flowed like water, hand-embroidered with gold thread in patterns that told her story. Rising phoenixes hidden in the seams. I feel happy, Lindsay said, surprised by the truth of it. Happiness had seemed impossible once. Now it felt inevitable. The ceremony was brief, meaningful, perfect. When Charlie slipped the ring on her finger, Lindsay thought about how different this felt from her first wedding. Richard had wanted spectacle. Charlie wanted partnership. Richard had made her small. Charlie made her feel infinite. I promise to support your dreams, Charlie said. Not to control them, not to claim them, but to stand beside you as you build them. I promise to see you completely and love what I see. I promise to be your partner in every sense, sharing credit and burden equally. I promise not to disappear into you, Lindsay said. To stay myself, fierce and whole. I promise to let you in, even when it's scary. I promise to build something beautiful with you, not for you or despite you, but with you. They kissed, and the small gathering erupted in applause. This was what marriage should be. Two complete people choosing to walk together, neither diminishing the other. At the reception, Diane approached with news. Phoenix Rising just hit $2 billion in valuation. The board wants to discuss expansion into Asia and South America. You're officially one of the most valuable fashion brands in the world. $2 billion. From $5 to $2 billion. It didn't seem real, but it was. Phoenix Rising had disrupted the industry completely. Every major brand was scrambling to copy their sustainable model. The blockchain authentication had become standard. And Lindsay had been invited to speak at conferences, to advise governments, to shape the future of fashion itself. Speech, someone called out. Lindsay stood, Charlie's hand warm in hers, and looked at the faces gathered. These people had believed in her when she was broken. They had worked beside her when the odds were impossible. They deserved acknowledgement. "A little over a year ago," she began, "my ex-husband threw a $5 bill at me and told me it was all I was worth. He wanted to humiliate me, to break me, to make sure I understood exactly how replaceable I was." She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. "But here's what he forgot. Queens don't need external validation. We don't need someone else to tell us our worth. We know it already. And when someone tries to diminish us, we use that energy as fuel." She pulled out that $5 bill, now permanently encased, and held it up. "This represents the greatest gift my ex-husband ever gave me. Not because of its monetary value, but because it forced me to prove to myself what I already knew. I am brilliant. I am valuable. I am unstoppable. And anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve space in my life." Phoenix Rising isn't just about fashion. It's about refusing to accept other people's limitations. It's about building something so extraordinary that it makes your doubters irrelevant. It's about taking every insult, every obstacle, every moment of defeat, and transforming it into triumph. She looked at Charlie, at Zara, at her team. "Thank you for believing in me when I was still learning to believe in myself. Thank you for building this empire beside me. And thank you for proving that the best revenge is success so complete it makes revenge unnecessary." They toasted, and Lindsay felt the final pieces of her old life fall away. She wasn't Richard's ex-wife anymore. She wasn't even the woman who had turned $5 into an empire. She was simply Lindsay Lamb, designer, revolutionary, queen. Later, as she danced with Charlie under string lights, he whispered, "Any regrets?" "Not a single one," Lindsay said. "Everything happened exactly as it should have. Even the pain, especially the pain." As the night deepened, Lindsay found herself on the terrace, looking at stars and thinking about journeys. Richard was somewhere out there, living whatever life he had managed to cobble together from ruins. She hoped he had learned something, but it didn't matter either way. His chapter in her story was closed. The $5 bill would hang in her office forever, reminder of how far she had come. But it wasn't about Richard anymore. It was about her. About resilience and rebellion and refusing to stay down when the world tried to break you. Zara joined her on the terrace. "Penny for your thoughts?" "Just thinking about that night in your apartment. When I told you I was going to turn $5 into Richard's worst nightmare. You did more than that. You turned it into your greatest dream." "Yeah," Lindsay said softly. "I did." Charlie appeared, offering his hand. "Dance with me, Mrs. Dean." Lindsay took his hand, let him pull her close. They swayed to music drifting from inside, and she felt absolutely present, not haunted by the past or anxious about the future. Just here now, whole. This was victory. Not the money or the fame or the empire. Those were symptoms. The real victory was standing here, loved and loving, successful and satisfied, with nothing left to prove. She had taken a $5 insult and built a crown from it. She had faced her demons and won. She had lost everything and rebuilt better. She had loved and lost and loved again, smarter this time. And somewhere, that $5 bill hung on her wall, glowing softly in the dark. Testament to resilience, proof of transformation, evidence that queens rise, no matter how far they fall. Richard had thought he was ending her story when he threw that money, but he was actually beginning it. Beginning the story of the queen who rose, the woman who transformed pain into power, the designer who changed fashion forever, and the best part, this was just the beginning. Phoenix Rising would continue. New collections, new innovations, new ways to prove that fashion could be beautiful and responsible. New ways to show the world that brilliance couldn't be contained or controlled. Lindsay Lamb had arrived, not as someone's wife or shadow, but as herself. Complete, fierce, unstoppable, the $5 queen, the phoenix risen. The woman who proved that the best revenge is becoming so extraordinary that your enemies become footnotes. She smiled, held Charlie closer, and let herself be happy. completely, unreservedly, magnificently happy because she had earned it. Every beautiful moment of it.